The top three things today in my notebook are the financials, which are critical in the U.S., number one, number two, Japan, and number three, the price of copper. So just get into the financials first of all. As the financials go, it's as the market goes. So the financials barely got back above its trend line yesterday. That trend line for the XLF is 21.21. So in other words, if the financials break immediately this morning, that's going to be a very bearish thing for the stock market's beta. And yes, beta matters. We should, and I think will, traverse that 1779 support on the S&P if the financials are indeed broken. The financials are broken. Why? Because bond yields are falling, and as bond yields fall, the yield spread compresses, which is of course bad for the financials on the margin. Point number two, Japan continues to be a cesspool of underperformance. Another down 0.6% overnight. Again, a couple points to be made here. Number one, the U.S. ripped yesterday. Japan didn't care. Number two, Asia was largely closed last night into the Chinese New Year, and Japan just was the only market you could trade. And again, it closed on the lows for the month. Japan's down 8.4% now for the year to date, and it's bearish from a trend perspective, which is of course not new this morning, but again is new as of this year. Finally, copper is diverging negatively versus the commodity complex, and that's interesting and new. Copper's obviously got its own supply issues, but again, an interesting signal nevertheless. Copper's the first big one here to snap the trend line. And again, we're not completely wed to commodities. We just had commodities in terms of inflation in the CRB index for the month to date. We've just had that right. So it's not like a dog we need to ride forever, but it's an interesting signal to see copper break nevertheless. So those are your top three things.